Hi, thanks for watching. We're always encouraged to know that God is using this ministry to touch lives, not only here in San Antonio, Texas, but also around the world. So if that's you and you have a story about how God has changed your life, we'd love to hear it. Please email your story to us at mystory@faith-outreach.org. Also, if you'd like to partner with this ministry and support it financially, you can do so through our online giving. It's your continued support that allows us the opportunity to bring you God-inspired messages like this one every single week. Please keep your mind and heart open to what God has to say to you today through this message.
Are you in St. John? Chapter number 1. St. John, chapter number 1. And we dealt with a part of verse 14 the last time. I'm going to go directly to that now. And the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his what? Glory. We beheld his glory. Now we sprung into this from Luke chapter 9, verse number 32. In Luke 9:32, we have the account, which is a parallel account of what's happening in Matthew chapter 17, the Mount of Transfiguration. Jesus takes his disciples up and he's transfigured before them. And the Bible says, when their eyes were opened, they saw his glory. Amen. Now, as the awakening happens, as the eyes of the public come open, as the eyes of really the church first, as the eyes of the church come open and they begin to see the glory of God and start walking in the glory of God, what is revival in the church will work itself out to an awakening in the world. The church becomes a light, and the world becomes aware that God is moving in his church. And I'm saying to you unequivocally, and I'm saying to you without any doubt in my heart about it at all, that America will undergo another awakening. And I believe that there are evidences that it has already started. While Isaiah 60 is the case, Isaiah chapter 60 declares that darkness shall cover the earth and gross darkness the people. While that is a reality, that's what you're going to hear and see on the news, and that's what you're going to hear in the papers, is the darkness that is covering the earth and the gross darkness that's covering the people. You're going to see it in television programming. You're going to see it in policy. You're going to see it in government. Everywhere, darkness will cover the earth and gross darkness the people. But I'm thankful that Isaiah 60 does not end with that. In fact, let's just, while you got your finger stuck in 1 John, let's go on over to Isaiah the 60th chapter. And look at that verse real quick, and then we'll come back to the book of John. Isaiah 60. Paper rules. I love to hear the paper rustling. One EMP blast and your techno Bibles are done. However, I can keep flipping the pages even in the midst of the EMP blast. Electromagnetic pulse, EMP. Because I heard you thinking, EMP? Isaiah 60. Arise, shine, for thy light is come, and the glory of the Lord is risen upon thee. For behold, now he says, arise because of something. The word for there in verse 2 is equal to the word because. Arise and shine because, behold, take note, pay attention. There is prophetic unfolding. That's what the word behold means. There's a prophetic unfolding. There's a prophetic declaration coming. Pay attention to this. The darkness, not just darkness, the darkness shall cover the earth, and gross darkness the people. There is a darkness that's coming on the earth. And as I said to you earlier, you're going to see and hear a lot about that. It's going to flood you from every direction. And if you are not a people who understand that Isaiah 60 does not end there, you will grow in despair and wait to get out of here. But the verse doesn't end there. It says that darkness shall cover the earth and gross darkness the people. Look at the very next word if you're reading the King James. But is a contrasting conjunction. It is a word that combines two thoughts that contrast. Darkness will cover the earth. The darkness will cover the earth. The darkness is this darkness that has been planned from ages past.
Yes, sir.
It has been walked out in the strategy rooms of darkness that this would be the final strike that would take a people out. And it's going to cover the earth, and it's going to look like, listen to me, it's going to look like it's working.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But it says in that second verse, but the Lord shall arise upon thee. God's going to rise on somebody. Now, whether or not you are among the thee has a lot to do with your understanding of what's happening in the last days, but he's going to rise on somebody.
Yes, sir. Amen.
The Lord shall arise upon thee, and his what?
Glory.
His glory shall be seen upon thee.
Hallelujah.
So the darkness is not the end of the story. The glory is the end of the story. We go over to 1 John, and 1 John, just chapter 1, verse 14. It says that we beheld his glory. We beheld his glory, his glory, his glory. As the only begotten of the Father, full of what? Grace and truth. So the glory of Jesus is the full manifestation of grace and truth. That's why we looked at the word grace. And we'll look at truth this morning because both of those concepts are connected with the glory.
Hallelujah.
They're connected with the glory of God. I told you that glory is the true essence of a thing. I told you that glory is something in full manifestation. I used the example of a rose. In the morning dew, it's closed. But when the sun comes up and that morning dew and sunlight hits the rose, the petals begin to unfold. And about 11 or 12 o'clock, it is fully unfurled, and the smell of that rose is coming forward. That rose is in its glory at that time. It's fully manifested. God's doing some things and will continue to do some things on his church. But the church right now seems to be like that rose that is closed. The dew is on it. It is a rose. It's closed. But I'm telling you that the glory of God, like the sunlight, will come upon that thing, and the church will fully unfold, and we'll see what God intended about the full manifestation of his glory in his church. It's not now as it always will be.
Hallelujah.
The glory of God will fill his house. It'll be seen. In your day and my day, it'll be seen. I'm so excited about it. And so we'll be telling you about some evidences that such a move has already begun. I may rush a little ahead of myself this morning because I want to bait you with some of that. Let me say to you, April will be a prophetic month for the nation.
Yes.
The month of April will be a prophetic month for the United States of America with reference to what is happening spiritually. Mark what I'm saying to you. Some things are going to happen spiritually that you will be able to see as a people who are looking and can see it, that God's glory is manifesting. I'll just tell you about, I'm going to rush ahead. I'll come back to this as we travel down the weeks of this message. But on the 9th of April, it's a very significant day. The 9th of April. The 9th of April was actually the day that Dr. Martin Luther King was buried. The 9th of April is also the official end of the Civil War, the date where the Civil War officially ended. The 9th of April is also the date in history in the initiation of Azusa, the Azusa revival. This year, on the 9th of April, I think without much of that knowledge in tow, 2 huge prayer meetings have been planned on either side of the nation. In Washington, D.C., the anticipation is to gather about 30,000 pastors to bow their knees before God in prayer in the nation's capital. On the other side of the United States, in Los Angeles, commemorating the Azusa revival, there is another group gathering. It's about 120,000 young people gathering in a stadium to cry out to God in prayer. Now, these 2 groups didn't plan this. In fact, they're kind of, if the truth be told, they could work better together. But in the midst of human frailty, I believe God showed up and planned that it's bi-generational, it's church leadership on the one side, and it's the next generation and the emerging generation on the other side of the nation. Both of them called a massive national prayer meeting. Something's happening. Something is happening despite us. Sometimes it's God using a broken people to move into his purposes and plans, but sometimes it's despite us. God superintends over the frailty of men. Glory be to God. He rules over it anyway and gets his purposes met. So we're coming to this time in this nation, in the month of April particularly, there's something particular about that month. Keep your spiritual eyes open. Keep your spiritual ears aware. As God began to manifest his glory in the church in America. Can I whet your appetite with one more thing that I'm just going to fill out later? I interviewed, you'll see this coming up on Trinity Broadcasting Network in a few weeks. Daniel Kolinda. Daniel is the successor to Reinhard Bonnke. And there's a tremendous ministry, as you know. I said this a few weeks ago from this platform, that God used Reinhard Bonnke to affect the nations of Africa. Showed him in a dream blood washing from the northern horn of Africa all the way down through South Africa, all the way over the continent, and the words ringing out in the spirit, in his spirit, Africa shall be saved. Amen. And to date, 74 million people have come to the Lord in that nation through that ministry alone. Now, there's other ministries in Africa, but through that ministry alone, 74 million people. So I was interviewing his successor, and I asked him, given this ministry and the impact of it, what is the most astounding miracle that you've seen in all this time that you've been in the wake of Reinhard Bonnke's ministry? And he told me he said miracles are so common in that ministry, in the ministry that God has given us. It's so common that we feel at odds when something doesn't happen miraculously. If a blind eye is not open, if somebody's not getting up out of a wheelchair, if there's not, there's something, there's something wrong. So he says, we have this diet of miracles. He said, but the most astounding miracle that I can think of is a miracle in a book that I'm reading now, just to introduce that book to my son yesterday, Jarrell. The book is entitled Raised from the Dead. This woman, this African woman, I'll fill this out later, so I'm just going to give it a little bit now. Her husband died, but she got a hold to Hebrews chapter 11. Go to Hebrews 11 with me right quick. Can y'all tolerate this for a little bit? Hebrew. Yeah, yeah. Mark 11 is Brother Hagin's chapter. That's the one he wrote. We kind of think he wrote it, but Hebrews chapter 11, verse number. Hebrews chapter 11. Begin with reading with me in verse number 33. Who through faith subdued kingdoms. This is, of course, this is the hall of fame of faith, right?
Yeah.
These are people, average people like you and me, who found themselves in the midst of circumstances that God used them in, and they depended on God, and God showed himself mighty and strong on their behalf.
Yeah.
He will do the same for you and me. These are not a super grade of human being.
Come on, sir.
Are you listening to me? These are people just like you and me, having like passions. Remember James said concerning Elijah that he was a man of like passions, like as we are.
Yeah. Amen.
That's an Elizabethan English and phrase of speech to say he's just like us. He didn't get up every day with a halo over his head. Elijah was fiery. He probably talked a little fiery at times. He was a man of like passion. And so what we see in Hebrews 11 is we see not a special grade of human being. We see people that God has placed an assignment on their life. And in that moment, they step up to it.
Hallelujah.
And this is, in verse 33, starts to say some of the stuff they accomplished. Who through faith subdued kingdoms. They wrought right. Listen to this. Listen to this. Through their faith, they subdued kingdoms.
Yeah.
Wrought righteousness, quenched the violence of fire. Out of weaknesses were made strong, waxed valiant in fight, turned to flight the armies of Israel. And here's what this woman in Africa heard Reinhard Bonnke preach out of Hebrews 11, verse number 35. Women received their dead raised to life again. And her husband died. And her husband died. Now, if this wasn't as well documented as it is, I wouldn't be telling you this. But it is incredibly documented. Her husband died, and she got a hold of this thing that women receive. What does it say? Women receive their dead raised to life again. Her husband died. And the doctor identified his death with a death certificate, sent his body to the mortician, and the mortician embalmed him. And filled out the paperwork indicating that the man had been embalmed. But it didn't mean nothing to this woman. She said, I believe if I get his body to the meeting where Reinhard Bonnke is preaching, God will raise him to life. So she fights with the officials for the body of her dead husband. And she gets this man, you can imagine coming to church with your husband's body. So they move things out of the way, for her. I wouldn't try to stop her if she bought it. If she can get it out of the hands of the officials, I ain't gonna stop her. She took this man's body, her husband, laid it on a table in the basement. While Reinhard is upstairs preaching the dedication of this building. Now I'm telling you this story for this reason. He accredits that miracle because he didn't even know the woman had brought a dead body and put it in the basement. He's preaching. But he did say something that I'll fill out later. He said he had asked God for a particular sign about moving the headquarters of his ministry from Germany to Florida, coming to America. And there was some things going on with that, I'll fill out later, that was very difficult for him to come to terms with. So he said to God, I need a special sign that you want that to happen. While he's preaching the gospel upstairs, the woman is attending the body of her dead husband in the basement. And the glory of God hit that building. And suddenly this dead man opens his eyes, and his veins that were filled with formaldehyde now flows with blood. Let me just say this. I'm actually going to get some video that we'll be looking at on this issue a little later, because it's been videoed and it's been put in a book, and everybody has been asked, is this valid? But here's what Reinhardt said. Reinhardt said, the occurrence of that miracle was evidence to me that God had not only spoken to my heart about Africa, but his current word to my spirit is that America shall be saved. America will experience the glory of God in inexplicable ways. You will have to say it's God and nothing else. It's God and no one else. It's not government. It's God. It's his glory. And I testify to you, as surely as I am who I am, God will send a revival in his church, and he will awaken this nation again to his glory. We'll see it with our eyes. We'll witness it in our day. He is God, and beside him, there is no other God.